They called her Doc Tiny, a nickname that didn't even begin to tell her story. Standing at just 5'2", Staff Sergeant Elena Rodriguez never looked like the kind of person who could carry a soldier's life on her shoulders. But the day would come when she'd do exactly that. And, in a way, no one in her unit would ever forget. 3 years before joining the Army, Elena had been on a very different path. She was in medical school, chasing her dream of becoming a surgeon, until a single moment shattered it all. It wasn't poor grades or lack of skill that ended her career, it was her fist. One heated exchange with a professor who sneered, "Women don't have the stomach for real medicine," and she snapped. The punch landed, the room went silent, and within hours, she was expelled. It had been building for months, subtle discrimination, being passed over for surgical rotations, watching less capable male classmates handed opportunities she had earned. That one final insult lit the fuse. The satisfaction lasted 3 seconds. The consequences followed her for years. At 29, she wore a different uniform. Elena was now a combat medic with the 101st Airborne. Her unit didn't know about her past, and she didn't offer it. What they did know was that she'd seen more blood, pain, and death than most could stomach. In the years after her expulsion, she'd worked the streets of Detroit as an EMT, treating overdose victims in abandoned buildings, delivering babies in crack houses, and holding pressure on gunshot wounds while rival gangs circled the ambulance. Detroit had been her training ground, teaching her lessons no classroom could. How to stay calm when the world turned into chaos. How to move fast when seconds meant life or death. How to read the signs of a dying body without a single word being spoken. During training at Fort Campbell, Elena's calm under pressure stood out. She didn't just follow the manual, she read people like a book. The way a shoulder slumped meant dislocation. A certain pallor hinted at internal bleeding. The faint hitch in breathing before shock set in. While other medics laughed and complained in downtime, she practiced sutures on fruit, studied medical journals, and drilled combat casualty procedures until they were second nature. But one man in the unit wasn't convinced. Colonel David Hayes was an old-school soldier, 3 tours in Iraq, a chest full of ribbons, and a reputation for a temper that could scorch the paint off a Humvee. During a pre-deployment briefing 6 months earlier, he'd read her file with the detached coldness of a man who had buried too many soldiers. "Rodriguez," he said without looking up. 2 years of medical school, EMT certification, adequate scores in field training. Then his eyes finally met hers, sharp and assessing. "Out there, hesitation kills. I hope you're in the capable category, because your record suggests you're adequate at best." It hit her like a slap, but she didn't flinch. "I won't let the unit down, sir." That night, she called her younger brother, Miguel, a firefighter who knew her medical school secret. "He thinks I'm just another weak link," she said. Miguel laughed. "Elena, you talked me through treating my own burns while a warehouse collapsed around me. You don't break under pressure, you get stronger." But Hayes' words stuck. Over the months that followed, she doubled down. Extra training, endless simulations, late-night study sessions. She ran farther, lifted heavier, and pushed herself beyond exhaustion. Slowly, the unit began to notice. Privates sought her advice. Veteran sergeants trusted her judgment. Even some of the other medics started asking her for guidance. Still, Hayes' expression never changed. Watching her during exercises, he remained unreadable. Every successful drill felt like one small step toward proving him wrong. She promised herself when deployment came, she'd leave no doubt. September 15th. Forward, Operating Base Wolverine. The day began like countless others. Hot sun beating down, the faint smell of diesel and dust hanging in the air. Elena had been up since before dawn, treating the usual minor ailments, a twisted ankle, a bad rash, food poisoning. She'd just finished bandaging a blister when it hit. The first mortar screamed overhead, slamming into the motor pool 50 yards away. Black smoke and fire tore into the blue Afghan sky. For a heartbeat, the entire base froze. Then chaos erupted. Elena's body moved before her mind caught up, aid bag in hand, sprinting for the door. The second round hit the communications tower, sending debris raining down. Sirens wailed. Automatic gunfire erupted from multiple directions. It wasn't random. The Taliban had planned this perfectly. Rockets slammed into the perimeter walls. An RPG hit a Humvee near the main gate, flipping it like a toy and crushing 2 soldiers beneath. The mess tent became a slaughterhouse, a mortar punching through the canvas roof, shredding soldiers mid-breakfast. Elena ran toward the worst of it. Blood, screams, uniforms soaked crimson. Some stumbled out, missing limbs. The ones not making a sound. Those were the ones she dreaded most. She was triaging near the tent when another blast knocked her off her feet. Dazed, ears ringing, she forced herself up, and that's when she saw him. Colonel Hayes, pinned under a collapsed section of the command post, both legs mangled, blood pooling beneath him. Unconscious, pale, dying. The man who had doubted her was now completely in her hands. Elena dropped to her knees beside Hayes, her hands moving automatically, checking for a pulse, scanning for the worst injuries. Both legs had compound fractures, his breathing shallow, skin cold. The signs screamed internal bleeding. Without immediate intervention, he had less than an hour. Hayes's eyes fluttered open, focusing on her through the chaos. "Rodriguez," he rasped. "How bad?" She kept her voice level. "You're hurt bad, sir, but I'm getting you out of here." Gunfire cracked overhead. Another explosion sent a rain of debris their way. She threw herself over him, sharp fragments slicing into her back. Somewhere nearby, a helicopter's rotors thumped in the distance, then faded. Too much enemy fire. No landing here. The closest safe extraction point was 2 miles away, through open terrain swarming with Taliban fighters. Hayes gripped her uniform with surprising strength. "Don't let me die here, Doc." It was the first time she'd heard him speak without command in his voice, only raw, human fear. And in that moment, she saw something she hadn't before: trust. Around them, the base was in ruins. Over 200 wounded, fires, screams, the acrid smell of burning fuel and blood. Panic was a luxury Elena couldn't afford. Years on Detroit streets had trained her to shut it out, to break the chaos into steps. Her voice cut through the noise. "If you can walk, help someone who can't. Stop bleeding. Keep airways open. Get them away from fire." Private Johnson, a 19-year-old who'd been asking her first aid questions during training, stumbled up with a bloody gash on his forehead. "Doc, what do you need?" "Arterial bleeds first," she said, shoving gauze into his hands. "If the blood's spurting, you use a tourniquet. They'll die in minutes without it. Can you handle that?" He nodded, sprinting toward a soldier bleeding from the leg, and she felt a flicker of pride. Her training was multiplying. She moved quickly, sealing a sucking chest wound with MRE plastic, positioning an unconscious man to keep his airway clear, cinching her belt into a tourniquet for another. Some she saved, others she couldn't. One machine gunner's injuries were so severe that stopping to treat him would have meant losing 3 others. She stayed with him for 30 seconds, holding his hand until he passed, then forced herself to move on. Hayes was still her most critical patient, and too unstable to wait for a lull in the battle. His injuries demanded constant monitoring, and no one else had the skills to keep him alive. "We're moving him," she told the nearby soldiers during a brief pause in the gunfire. "You can't carry me that far," Hayes argued, his face pale but eyes alert. "You weigh half what I do." "With respect, sir, that's not your decision," she replied, already stripping canvas and tent poles to make a stretcher. She called for 4 volunteers. Sergeant Williams, chest wound bleeding but steady on his feet, stepped forward. Johnson joined him, along with 2 more soldiers. As they secured Hayes, he caught her wrist. "If it goes bad, leave me," he ordered. "I don't take orders from patients," she shot back. For the first time since she'd met him, Hayes almost smiled. The first miles. The stretcher cut into her gloved hands as they moved through the smoking remains of the compound. Hayes's weight, close to 190 pounds, felt heavier with each uneven step over rocky ground. "Contact left," Johnson shouted, firing toward muzzle flashes on a ridge. Bullets snapped overhead, forcing them behind boulders. Elena crouched over Hayes, checking his pulse. It was thready, his breathing shallow, signs of hypovolemic shock. Without more fluids, he'd have 30 minutes. She started a second IV line, her hand steady despite the adrenaline. "How far?" Hayes whispered. "1.5 miles," she said, tightening a pressure bandage. "Stay with me, sir." But progress was slow. Too slow. Sniper fire cracked from the hills, forcing them to stop again and again. One round splintered the stretcher pole inches from her hand. That was the last straw. "I'm carrying him," she announced. "Doc, you'll kill yourself," Williams protested. "This way, we move faster and stay lower," she said, already rigging a harness from parachute cord to distribute the weight across her back and shoulders. She'd seen mountain rescue teams do this, but never under fire. Getting Hayes onto her back was like shouldering a bag of concrete that breathed. Her legs trembled. "This is insane," Hayes muttered weakly. "Sir, with all due respect, you don't get a vote." She gave him morphine to keep him still, then started forward. Every step sent pain shooting up her spine. The harness dug into her shoulders. Sweat stung her eyes. "Let us take turns," Johnson called. "No," she said without slowing. "If his airway closes or bleeding starts, you won't know. I have to do this." They pushed forward yards at a time, diving for cover when sniper rounds snapped past. Elena paused only to check his pulse, adjust his breathing position, or start another fluid bag. Halfway there, a bullet passed so close she felt its heat. She hit the dirt, Hayes' weight slamming her into the ground. Blood trickled from her nose. Still breathing, she reminded herself. Still alive. That was all that mattered. The last half mile felt endless. Elena's vision blurred from exhaustion and dehydration. Her legs were numb, shoulders raw where the harness cut deep, but Hayes was still breathing. Then, faint at first, the sound of helicopter rotors reached her ears. She could see the green smoke marking the landing zone ahead. "Almost there, sir," she whispered, though Hayes was unconscious now, the morphine keeping him under. 50 yards from the extraction point, her body finally gave out. She collapsed to her knees, Hayes still strapped to her back. Dust and debris swirled in the rotor wash as the medevac bird descended. Flight medics sprinted toward her. "What have we got?" one shouted over the roar. "Colonel David Hayes," she forced out, her voice hoarse, but steady. "Multiple trauma, compound fractures, possible internal bleeding, head injury. 2-liter saline, 10 milligrams morphine 90 minutes ago. Pulse 110, thready, blood pressure dropping." The medic looked at her with disbelief. "You carried him 2 miles?" "Someone had to," she said, swaying on her feet as the adrenaline began to fade. She tried to climb into the helicopter to keep monitoring Hayes, but her legs buckled. Strong arms caught her. Sergeant Williams, his own chest wound forgotten. "Easy, Doc. You've done enough." The medevac lifted off, carrying Hayes toward Bagram Air Base. Only then did Elena let herself feel the weight of what she'd done. Her back was on fire, her feet numb, her uniform soaked with sweat and blood. Some hers, most not. The ride back to base with reinforcements took 3 hours. By the time they arrived, the Taliban had withdrawn, leaving devastation behind. Collapsed buildings, destroyed vehicles, and the haunting stillness after battle. She tried to go straight to the aid station, but her legs gave out again. "Rodriguez needs medical attention," Williams told the arriving medics. She wanted to protest. Others needed help more. But no words came. Exhaustion claimed her. The next 72 hours blurred into a cycle of medical evaluations, debriefings, and deep, dreamless sleep. The casualty count was staggering. 12 killed in action, 43 wounded. But every wounded soldier had reached medical care alive. Her quick organization under fire had turned chaos into a coordinated rescue effort. Doctors told her later that Hayes had been less than 30 minutes from bleeding out when he reached surgery. They removed shrapnel from his spine, repaired his shattered legs, and stabilized him. "Whatever you did to keep him alive out there," the surgeon said, "it worked. He'll walk again, though he'll carry some of that shrapnel forever." 2 weeks later, she stood in formation as her name was called. The Distinguished Service Cross, the Army's second highest decoration for valor, was placed in her hands. The citation read, "For extraordinary heroism in action against an armed enemy, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez's selfless courage and medical expertise under intense enemy fire saved the lives of numerous soldiers and exemplified the highest traditions of military service." But the recognition that mattered most came quietly. When Hayes was stable enough for visitors, he asked for her. She found him propped up in a hospital bed in Germany, casts on both legs, eyes sharp and clear. "I owe you an apology," he said, "and my life." "You don't owe me anything, sir. I was just doing my job." "No," Hayes said firmly. "I doubted you. I was wrong. You carried me through enemy fire when any rational person would have left me. You saved my life and the lives of everyone on that base." He handed her a letter. His recommendation for her promotion to officer candidate school. "The Army needs leaders like you." She read it, smiled, and handed it back. "Thank you, sir, but I'm staying right where I'm needed. Someone's got to patch up the heroes." 6 weeks later, she returned to duty. The soldiers looked at her differently now, not as Doc Tiny, but as the medic who had carried their commander through hell. New recruits would whisper about it. She always downplayed it. "Just doing my job." But those who had been there knew the truth. In the dust and blood of Afghanistan, she had proven herself beyond doubt. Years later, when asked about that day, she gave the same answer, her voice calm, her eyes steady. "We don't leave people behind. If you were moved by Staff Sergeant Elena Rodriguez's courage, help share her story. Hit like so more people hear it. Subscribe for more true stories of sacrifice and bravery. And in the comments, tell us, what does heroism mean to you? Because sometimes the smallest person on the field carries the heaviest weight and still makes it home.